Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Media representations in discourse analysis. Media representations in discourse analysis focus on how the media constructs, shapes, and reflects social realities through language. Media discourse plays a crucial role in shaping public opinion, influencing cultural norms, and disseminating ideologies. By examining the language, images, and narratives used in media outlets, discourse analysis reveals how certain topics, social groups, or events are framed and represented. These representations are not neutral. They often reflect broader societal power structures, biases, and ideologies, making media a critical site for discourse analysis. Discourse analysis of media representations uncovers the ways in which language choices and framing techniques influence how audiences understand social issues such as politics, gender, race, class, and global conflicts. Media representations also play a role in reinforcing or challenging stereotypes, shaping collective identities, and legitimizing or critiquing dominant ideologies. Key features of media representations in discourse analysis. Point 1. Framing of issues. Framing refers to how media outlets present and structure an issue or event, emphasizing certain aspects while downplaying or omitting others. Through framing, media constructs particular narratives that influence how audiences interpret issues. Example: in news coverage of protests, media outlets may frame the events either as peaceful demonstrations advocating for justice or as riots characterized by violence and chaos. The language used to describe the protests shapes how the public perceives the legitimacy of the movement, its participants, and the social issues at stake. Point 2. Stereotyping and marginalization. Media representations often rely on stereotypes that simplify and generalize complex identities, often in ways that reinforce social inequalities. Discourse analysis of media can uncover how certain social groups, such as ethnic minorities, women, LGBTQ+ communities, or immigrants, are marginalized or misrepresented through stereotypical portrayals. Example: in Hollywood films and television shows, discourse analysis might reveal that black characters are often depicted as criminals or victims, reinforcing negative stereotypes. Similarly, women in advertising are frequently portrayed in passive, domestic roles, while men are shown as strong, independent decision-makers. These representations marginalize individuals by reducing them to simplistic, biased images. Point 3. Power and ideology. Media representations often reflect and perpetuate ideologies that serve the interests of powerful social groups. Discourse analysis explores how media outlets frame issues in ways that align with specific political, economic, or cultural interests, reinforcing dominant ideologies such as capitalism, patriarchy, or nationalism. Example: in media coverage of economic policies, news outlets that favor free market ideologies might frame government regulations as restrictions on freedom, or burdens on businesses, while downplaying the social benefits of regulation, such as worker protections or environmental safeguards. This ideological bias influences how the audience understands economic issues and shapes political debates. Point 4. Representation of social and political issues. Media discourse significantly influences how key social and political issues are represented. These representations shape public discourse around topics such as immigration, climate change, healthcare, and terrorism. Discourse analysis examines the language and narratives used to portray these issues, uncovering the underlying assumptions and ideologies. Example: in the representation of climate change, some media outlets frame the issue as a scientific consensus requiring immediate action, while others frame it as a controversy with ongoing debate. The latter framing introduces doubt and reduces the sense of urgency, potentially leading to public inaction on climate policy. Point 5. Intertextuality and cultural narratives. Media representations often draw on intertextuality, where texts reference or incorporate other texts, images, or cultural narratives. This process allows media to evoke shared cultural meanings, connect current events to historical contexts, or frame stories within familiar ideological structures. Example: a news report on a political scandal might reference previous scandals, reinforcing a narrative of systemic corruption in government. This intertextual reference shapes public perception by linking individual events to a broader cultural narrative about the failures of political institutions. Methods for analyzing media representations in discourse analysis. Point 1. Critical discourse analysis, CDA. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, is a key method for examining media representations, particularly in terms of how media discourse reinforces power dynamics and social inequalities. CDA focuses on uncovering the ideologies and power relations embedded in media language, exploring how certain groups or ideas are privileged while others are marginalized. Example: a CDA of media coverage of immigration might reveal how newspapers frame immigrants as illegal or invaders, which reinforces xenophobic ideologies and constructs immigrants as threats to national identity. The analysis would explore how these representations serve to maintain dominant power structures and limit empathy for immigrant communities. Point 2. Framing analysis. Framing analysis focuses on how media frames particular issues or events, influencing how audiences understand them. This method examines the specific language, images, and structures used in media stories, highlighting which aspects of an issue are emphasized or downplayed. Example: in media coverage of healthcare reform, framing analysis might show that conservative outlets frame the issue in terms of cost and government overreach, while liberal outlets frame it as a matter of access and human rights. These frames shape public opinion by influencing how the audience interprets the debate over healthcare policy. Point 3. Multimodal discourse analysis. Multimodal discourse analysis examines how different modes of communication, e.g., text, images, sound, work together to create meaning in media representations. This method is particularly useful for analyzing visual media, such as advertisements, television, film, and online content, where multiple semiotic modes combine to convey messages. Example: in an analysis of political campaign advertisements, multimodal discourse analysis might explore how visuals, e.g., images of happy families or national symbols, background music, and spoken slogans work together to construct a positive image of the candidate. The analysis would reveal how different modes contribute to the overall representation of the political message. Point 4. Lexical and metaphor analysis. Lexical analysis focuses on the specific word choices used in media representations, while metaphor analysis examines how metaphors shape understanding by linking abstract ideas to concrete experiences. Both methods help reveal the implicit meanings and biases embedded in media discourse. Example: in an analysis of economic news coverage, lexical analysis might reveal the frequent use of terms like job creators to refer to wealthy individuals or corporations, which implicitly frames them as beneficial to society. Metaphor analysis might show how economic recessions are described as storms or crises, framing them as natural, uncontrollable events rather than the result of human policy decisions. Examples of media representations in discourse analysis. Example 1. Media representations of terrorism. Discourse analysis of media coverage of terrorism often reveals patterns of bias and stereotyping in how different perpetrators are represented. For example, terrorist acts committed by Muslim individuals are frequently framed as acts of jihad or radical Islam, reinforcing stereotypes of Muslims as violent extremists. In contrast, similar acts committed by non-Muslims might be framed as the actions of lone wolves or individuals with mental health issues, downplaying ideological motives. This difference in framing reflects a bias in how different groups are represented, contributing to Islamophobia and the marginalization of Muslim communities. Example 2. Gender representations in advertising. In an analysis of advertising discourse, researchers might uncover patterns of gendered stereotypes that reinforce traditional gender roles. Women in advertisements are often depicted in domestic settings, performing caregiving or beauty-related activities, while men are shown in positions of power or authority. Discourse analysis would examine how language, e.g., product slogans, and visual representations, e.g., images of women in kitchens or men in offices, work together to perpetuate these stereotypes. By highlighting these patterns, discourse analysis can offer insights into how media representations contribute to gender inequality. Example 3. Representations of race in news coverage. Discourse analysis of news coverage on crime might reveal racial bias in how perpetrators are described. For example, crimes committed by Black or Latino individuals might be described using language that emphasizes violence or gang affiliations, while crimes by white individuals are often described as isolated incidents, with more focus on personal circumstances or mental health issues. Lexical analysis might show that terms like thug or gang member are more frequently applied to racial minorities, while terms like troubled youth are used for white individuals. This biased representation reinforces racial stereotypes and contributes to racial inequality in public perceptions of crime and justice. Example 4. Environmental issues in media. Discourse analysis of media coverage of environmental issues such as climate change can reveal how ideological bias influences representation. Conservative media outlets might frame environmental regulations as harmful to economic growth, using terms like job-killing policies or government overreach, while downplaying the environmental crisis. In contrast, liberal outlets might emphasize the urgency of action, framing climate change as an existential threat and focusing on the moral responsibility to future generations. These competing frames influence how the public understands the issue and what types of policies they support. Challenges in analyzing media representations through discourse. Point 1. Multiplicity of media sources. Media discourse is highly diverse, spanning traditional news outlets, digital platforms, social media, films, and advertisements. Analyzing media representations requires considering the unique characteristics of each medium, as well as how discourse shifts across platforms. This multiplicity can make it challenging to capture the full scope of media representations on a given issue. Point 2. Implicit ideologies. The ideologies embedded in media representations are often implicit rather than explicit, making them difficult to detect. Media outlets may present themselves as neutral or objective, even when promoting a specific ideological stance. Discourse analysts must be sensitive to subtle language choices, framing techniques, and omissions to uncover these underlying biases. Point 3. Audience interpretation. While discourse analysis reveals how media represents certain issues, it does not always account for how different audiences interpret these representations. The same media text can be understood in various ways by different individuals, depending on their cultural, social, and political backgrounds. This complexity makes it challenging to generalize about the effects of media representations. Conclusion. Media representations in discourse analysis are essential for understanding how language, images, and narratives shape public perception, reinforce ideologies, and influence social attitudes. Through framing, stereotyping, and the selective presentation of issues, media plays a critical role in constructing social reality. By applying methods such as critical discourse analysis, framing analysis, and multimodal discourse analysis, researchers can uncover the power dynamics and biases embedded in media discourse. Whether examining news coverage, advertising, or social media, discourse analysis provides valuable insights into how media representations affect our understanding of social, political, and cultural issues. Frequently asked questions. What are media representations in discourse analysis? Media representations refer to how the media constructs and presents social realities through language, images, and narratives. Discourse analysis examines how media shapes public opinion, reinforces ideologies, and influences cultural norms. How does framing impact media representations? Framing refers to the way media outlets present issues by emphasizing certain aspects while omitting others. This technique influences how audiences interpret events or topics, shaping public perception. How are stereotypes revealed in media discourse? Stereotypes are often uncovered in media discourse by analyzing how social groups are portrayed using generalized or biased language. Discourse analysis exposes how certain groups, like ethnic minorities or women, are marginalized through oversimplified depictions. What role does ideology play in media discourse? Media representations frequently reflect and reinforce dominant ideologies. Discourse analysis uncovers how media outlets promote specific political, economic, or social beliefs, shaping the public's understanding of key issues. How does critical discourse analysis, CDA, approach media representations? CDA examines how media discourse reinforces power structures and social inequalities by revealing the underlying ideologies and language. It focuses on how media privileges certain groups or ideas while marginalizing others. How does media discourse influence perceptions of social and political issues? Media representations of topics like immigration, climate change, or healthcare are influential in shaping public discourse. Through the selective use of language, media can frame these issues in ways that align with specific political or ideological agendas. What is the importance of intertextuality in media discourse? Intertextuality refers to how media texts reference or incorporate other cultural narratives, events, or texts. This technique reinforces shared cultural meanings and connects current events to historical or ideological frameworks. How do media representations contribute to stereotyping? Media often relies on simplified or biased portrayals that reinforce social stereotypes. Discourse analysis helps identify these patterns and explains how they marginalize certain groups by reducing them to limited or negative traits. What methods are used to analyze media representations? Methods include critical discourse analysis, CDA, to examine power dynamics, framing analysis to explore how issues are presented, and multimodal discourse analysis to study how various modes, e.g., text, images, work together in media content. What challenges arise when analyzing media representations? Challenges include the diversity of media sources, implicit ideologies that are not immediately visible, and varying audience interpretations, which make it difficult to generalize the effects of media discourse across different demographics.